Eira walked the familiar streets of the city, her mind heavy with thoughts that seemed to have no resolution. How many times had she started over? Every project she took on, every new chapter in her life, always ending in the same place, uncertainty. Is this all there is, she wondered, gazing at the skyline. The idea of fate seemed absurd to her, and yet the pattern was undeniable. Something larger was at play, something she could not grasp. Do you believe in destiny? Luka asked, breaking the silence in the small cafe where they sat. His question hung in the air like a puzzle. He was a man of action, a leader, never one to contemplate the stars. But even he couldn't deny the feeling gnawing at him lately, that no matter how hard he pushed, something was missing. Destiny? Eira replied, sipping her coffee slowly. I used to think that we create our own, but now, I'm not sure anymore. Do you ever feel like, no matter what you do, you're stuck in a loop? Luka smirked, but it wasn't a smile of confidence. I thought being in control was the key. But maybe we're never really in control. In another part of the city, Sophie sat quietly in her therapy office. Listening to others' problems had always brought her peace, but now she found herself unable to help even herself. She had sacrificed so much for the sake of harmony, for the sake of others. Is it wrong to want something for myself? She whispered into the stillness, as if the room might answer her. The weight of her unspoken desires was unbearable, and yet she feared what would happen if she voiced them. Kaito, on the other hand, was chasing his next thrill, as always. Music had always been his escape, but lately, even the notes seemed hollow. His bandmates couldn't understand why he never finished a song, why he always moved on to the next idea before the last one had time to breathe. Why can't you focus, they'd ask. But Kaito knew it wasn't that simple. How do you explain the need to keep moving to someone who's content standing still? He thought, pacing back and forth in his studio. As the days blurred together, they each began to notice something. A pull, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. It was a chance meeting with an old friend, a cryptic message overheard at a market, or perhaps just a feeling in their gut. Have you heard of the temple in the mountains? Someone had mentioned. They say there's a monk who knows things about you, about your path. What could they lose by visiting? Eira wasn't sure why she felt the need to go, but the weight of indecision had become too much. Luka's business was running smoothly, yet he felt more lost than ever. Sophie's compassion was stretched thin, leaving her empty, and Kaito's endless search for inspiration was taking him nowhere. Each of them, for reasons they couldn't fully explain, felt the urge to seek answers outside themselves. They made their way to the temple, strangers to one another, yet connected by the same thread of uncertainty. The path was steep, winding through ancient trees and misty cliffs. With every step, anticipation grew. Would they find what they were looking for? Or was this just another distraction, another dead end? As they reached the temple gates, an old monk named Master Sheng greeted them. His eyes twinkled with an understanding they hadn't expected. You are here because you seek answers, he said simply, his voice soft but resonant, as if he knew every question before it was asked. But the answers you seek are not outside you. They are written in the numbers that brought you here. Numbers? Luka frowned, skeptical. What do numbers have to do with anything? Master Sheng smiled knowingly. Numbers carry vibrations, energies that shape your life path. The last digit of your birth year holds secrets about who you are, what you must overcome, and where your strength lies. Each of you has a number, and that number has been guiding you, whether you realize it or not. Eira's breath caught in her throat. Could it be true? She wondered. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. Let me show you the weight of your numbers, Master Sheng said, turning toward the temple doors. The journey has only just begun. The temple was unlike anything they had imagined. There was no grandeur, no towering statues or elaborate decorations. Instead, simplicity reigned, a reflection of the teachings that Master Sheng would soon reveal. The soft hum of wind through bamboo trees and the distant sound of running water created a tranquility that settled into their bones. Each of them, despite their skepticism, felt a sense of peace. Why am I here? Eira thought, gazing up at the ancient stone walls. Is it possible that something as simple as a number could hold the answers I've been seeking? They gathered in the temple's meditation hall, sitting in a circle on the cool floor. Master Sheng's presence was calming, but his eyes held a depth of wisdom that made it impossible to hide from oneself. "Your journey begins here," he said, breaking the silence. "The answers you seek are not outside of you. They are hidden within the energies of your birth year." Luka shifted uncomfortably. "I don't see how numbers can explain anything," he muttered under his breath, his skepticism palpable. He had built his success through sheer willpower, through action. What could numerology teach him that hard work hadn't already? Master Sheng glanced at Luka, as though he had heard the unspoken doubt. "Numbers are more than mere symbols," he explained. "They carry vibrations, frequencies that influence the way you move through life. The last digit of your birth year holds unique lessons for each of you." Sophie looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of his words. She had always tried to bring peace to others, but at what cost? "So what do we do now?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Master Sheng stood, his movements fluid and deliberate. "First, you must understand the number you carry, its strength and its shadow. Only then can you walk in harmony with its energy." Kaito leaned back, his arms crossed. "Sounds like mysticism to me," he said with a shrug. "What's the point?" "The point," Master Sheng replied, locking eyes with him, "is that whether you believe or not, these forces shape your life. The question is, do you wish to live blindly, or do you wish to see?" The room fell silent. It was a challenge none of them had expected. They had come seeking answers, and yet, here they were, confronted by the idea that the answers had always been within them. Could it really be that simple? Eira wondered. "Each of you will learn your number," Master Sheng said, his voice calm but firm. "You will understand its power, and you will face its greatest challenge. Are you ready?" None of them responded immediately. Doubt lingered in their minds, but so too did the growing curiosity. What was this energy that supposedly governed their lives, and could embracing it finally bring them the clarity they had been searching for? Master Sheng gestured toward the door. "Tomorrow, we begin." Eira was the first to sit with Master Sheng the next morning. The sky was still pale, the first light of dawn creeping through the temple windows. She felt anxious, unsure of what to expect, but something about the monk's presence calmed her. He seemed to understand things she couldn't yet put into words. "Your number is 0, Master Sheng began, his voice gentle but authoritative. In Buddhist philosophy, 0 represents emptiness, but also infinite potential. It is the beginning and the end, a circle with no clear starting point." Eira swallowed hard. "So what does that mean for me?" "It means your life is one of cycles," he explained. "You are constantly evolving, reinventing yourself, and yet you often feel stuck in the same patterns. You see beginnings as failures, when, in truth, they are just new phases of your journey. Your strength lies in transformation, but your challenge is accepting that you don't need to finish the circle to find peace." The words struck deep. How many times had she abandoned projects, relationships, dreams, simply because they didn't feel complete? Was this why she always felt the need to start over? Eira stared at the floor, lost in thought. "How do I break the cycle?" she asked quietly, her voice betraying the weight of years of frustration. Master Sheng smiled faintly. "You don't break the cycle, you embrace it. You learn to see the beauty in each beginning without fearing the end. Your gift is the ability to create new paths. The challenge is to walk them without looking back in regret." Eira's eyes filled with tears. Could it really be that simple? Could her constant restarts be a sign of strength, not failure? She hadn't realized how much she had been holding on to, how much she had feared the uncertainty of her own path. "You are the artist of your own life," Master Sheng continued. "Your canvas is blank each time, but that is not a curse, it is a gift. Find peace in the emptiness, and you will find peace in yourself." As she left the meditation hall, Eira felt lighter. The burden of her past failures seemed to dissolve, replaced by a new sense of possibility. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to start again. Luka entered the hall the next day, still skeptical but intrigued. He had always prided himself on being a man of action, a leader who carved his own path. But lately, that path had felt increasingly isolated. Despite his successes, something was missing. Master Sheng greeted him with a nod. "Your number is 1, he said, as if he had known Luka's story long before they had met. 1 is the number of individuality, leadership, and initiative. You are a pioneer, always pushing forward. Luka nodded. That sounded like him. Always the first to take action, always leading the charge. But, Master Sheng added, his eyes narrowing slightly, with that strength comes a shadow. 1 is also the number of loneliness. You are so focused on forging your own path that you forget the value of others. Your leadership isolates you. The words stung, though Luka would never admit it. I've always been told leadership requires strength, decisiveness, he replied, his tone defensive. Isn't that what I've been doing? Leadership is not about control, Master Sheng said softly. True leadership is about guiding others, not from above, but alongside them. You have the strength to lead, but do you have the humility to listen? Luka frowned, the monk's words gnawing at him. He had always been so focused on results, on being the one in charge, that he had pushed away anyone who didn't follow his vision. Was that why his relationships, both personal and professional, were strained? How do I change that? Luka asked, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful. Master Sheng smiled. You don't need to change who you are. You simply need to remember that leadership is a shared journey. The people around you are not obstacles to overcome. They are allies, each with their own strengths. Lead with empathy, and you will find that the path is not so lonely. Luka left the temple that day feeling unsettled, but also enlightened. For the first time, he questioned not his leadership, but the way he had been leading. Could it be that true strength wasn't about standing alone, but about lifting others alongside him? Sophie had always been the peacemaker, the one who soothed tempers and maintained harmony in every aspect of her life. But lately, that peace had come at a cost. Her own needs, her own desires, left buried beneath her constant giving. She sat before Master Sheng, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken sacrifices. Your number is 2, he began, his tone calm and reassuring. 2 is the number of duality, balance, and harmony. You have a gift for seeing both sides, for bringing people together. But this gift, when unbalanced, can become a burden. Sophie nodded. She had always felt the need to keep the peace, even at the expense of her own happiness. You give so much to others, Master Sheng continued, that you forget to give to yourself. You believe that peace means avoiding conflict, but true peace requires honesty. It requires balance between giving and receiving. Sophie swallowed hard. She had spent years bending to the needs of others, afraid that asserting her own desires would disrupt the harmony she worked so hard to maintain. But in doing so, she had lost herself. How do I find that balance? She asked, her voice trembling. Master Sheng's gaze softened. By learning to speak your truth, even when it is uncomfortable. By understanding that you deserve the same peace you give to others. Your strength lies in your ability to connect, but your challenge is to not lose yourself in that connection. Sophie blinked back tears. She had always believed that maintaining peace meant sacrificing her own needs. But perhaps, as Master Sheng said, true peace was found in balance, not in silence, but in honesty. As she left the temple, Sophie felt a new resolve growing within her. She would no longer silence her voice for the sake of others' comfort. She would learn to stand in her truth, even if it meant disrupting the very peace she had worked so hard to create. Kaito's restless energy filled the meditation hall as he sat across from Master Sheng, fidgeting with the sleeve of his jacket. Music had always been his escape, but lately, nothing seemed to stick. Every song, every project felt incomplete. I can't seem to finish anything, he confessed, the frustration evident in his voice. I get inspired, but then it's like I lose interest before I even finish. Master Sheng nodded, his gaze calm but penetrating. Your number is 3, he said. 3 is the number of creativity, expression, and joy. You are naturally drawn to the arts, to creation, because it is your way of interacting with the world. But the same energy that drives you to create can also scatter your focus. Kaito frowned. So I'm doomed to keep jumping from one thing to the next. No, Master Sheng replied with a gentle smile. Your gift is the ability to see beauty in the moment, to express what others cannot. But your challenge is discipline. Creativity without direction is like fire without containment. It burns bright but leaves nothing behind. To harness your gift, you must learn to focus. Kaito sighed, running a hand through his hair. How do I do that? Master Sheng's expression remained serene. Through patience, through committing to the process, even when the spark fades, your creativity is a flame, but it needs to be nurtured carefully. Allow yourself to follow through, even when it's difficult. The idea of discipline made Kaito uneasy. He had always believed that creativity was something spontaneous, something that couldn't be forced. But perhaps that was his mistake, believing that the spark had to be constant for the flame to burn. Could it be that by learning to stay with something, even when it wasn't exciting, he could create something truly meaningful? As Kaito left the temple that morning, his thoughts churned. Discipline wasn't something he had ever valued. But now, as he considered Master Sheng's words, he began to see that perhaps the greatest art wasn't in the inspiration, but in the dedication to see it through. The temple's courtyard was bathed in the golden light of dusk, the soft hum of wind moving through the trees. Each of the 4 protagonists stood at the edge of a large mandala, drawn carefully on the ground in chalk. Master Sheng stood at the center, his presence grounding them as they prepared for their individual rituals. "Each of you carries the weight of your number," Master Sheng said, his voice calm but powerful. "Tonight, you will face your greatest challenge. Through this ritual, you will understand not just your strength, but the shadow that accompanies it." Eira stepped forward first, her heart racing. She had always feared the unknown, always felt the pressure to complete what she started. Now, standing at the edge of the labyrinth, she realized the journey wasn't about finishing. It was about accepting the cycle. She closed her eyes and began walking, following the twists and turns, her mind quieting with each step. For the first time, she wasn't trying to rush to the end. She simply allowed herself to walk, to be present. Luka's ritual was different. He was asked to lead a group meditation, but this time, without control. His challenge wasn't to direct, but to guide, gently, without force. He sat in the center of a circle, breathing deeply, listening to the quiet rhythm of those around him. For the first time, he wasn't the one in charge. And in that stillness, he found something he had never expected: peace. Sophie faced the mirror, her reflection staring back at her, the weight of years of unspoken desires filling the space between them. She took a deep breath and whispered the words she had never said aloud. "I need this for myself." The power of her voice, of her truth, shook something deep inside her. The peace she had always sought was not in silence, but in speaking up. Kaito, too, sat in silence. His challenge was not to move, not to act, but to stay still. His mind raced at first, desperate to chase the next idea, the next spark of inspiration. But slowly, as the minutes passed, he found himself settling. And in that stillness, something profound happened. A vision of his next project appeared, not as a fleeting idea, but as something he could truly commit to. As the rituals ended, Master Sheng smiled. "You have each faced your shadow. Now you must decide. Will you walk with it, or let it walk ahead of you?" The question hung in the air, and they each knew the answer. They would no longer be led by their shadows. The air felt different after the rituals, as if the temple itself had shifted with their realizations. Eira, Luka, Sophie, and Kaito sat together in the quiet courtyard, the weight of their personal discoveries still settling in their minds. For so long, each of them had fought their own battles, against their patterns, their habits, their fears. But now, something had changed. Eira was the first to speak. "I've always seen beginnings as failures," she admitted, her voice soft but sure. "But maybe they're just part of the process." Luka nodded, his usual confident posture softened. "I thought leadership was about being in control, but I realized today it's about being with others, not above them." Sophie looked down at her hands, then back up at her companions. "I've spent so much time keeping the peace, but I've never been honest about what I need. Today I spoke my truth, and it felt liberating." Kaito, who had always been the loudest of them, simply smiled. "I learned to stay still, to wait for the inspiration instead of chasing it, and when I did, I saw the whole picture, not just pieces." Master Sheng appeared quietly, as he often did, his presence filling the space with a sense of calm. "You have each faced your greatest challenge," he said, his voice steady. "But the journey does not end here. Now you must carry this understanding into the world." The thought filled them with both excitement and trepidation. What would it mean to live with this new awareness? Could they truly change the way they moved through life, or would the patterns eventually return? You have the strength to walk a new path, Master Sheng continued, sensing their unspoken doubts. But the unknown is not something to fear. It is where growth happens. It is where you will find your true self. His words hung in the air, resonating with each of them. For the first time, they weren't afraid of what lay ahead. They were ready. Before leaving the temple, Master Sheng gathered them one last time. The quiet anticipation in the room was palpable, each of them knowing that this would be their final teaching. They had each learned the significance of their own number, but now Master Sheng would reveal the meaning of all the numbers and how they intertwined with the lives of others. Numbers, Master Sheng began, are the language of the universe. Each number carries a vibration, an energy that influences your path. But no number exists in isolation. Just as you are connected to the people around you, your number is connected to others. He started with 0, the number of potential and renewal, and worked his way through to 9. As he explained each number, they began to understand how these energies had been at play in their lives all along. 0, he said, is the number of cycles, of endings and beginnings. Those with this number are always evolving, always changing, but they must learn to find peace within the cycle, not outside of it. 1 is the number of individuality, of leadership, he continued, turning to Luka. But with that leadership comes loneliness, unless you learn to lead with others, not above them. 2 is the number of harmony, he said, looking at Sophie. But true harmony requires balance, not just for others, but for yourself. He continued, explaining the meaning of each number up to 9, and with each explanation, the protagonists saw how their lives had been influenced by not only their own number, but the numbers of those around them. The numbers are a guide, Master Sheng concluded. They do not define you, but they offer insight. By understanding them, you can choose how to move forward. As they left the temple, the weight of the numbers felt lighter now. They understood their strengths and their weaknesses, and they knew how to navigate the paths ahead. The road back to their everyday lives felt different. The mountains that had once loomed over them now seemed welcoming. The mist that had obscured their path, now a reminder of the beauty in the unknown. Each of the 4 walked in silence, reflecting on the journey they had taken, the lessons they had learned. Eira felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The cycle of beginnings and endings no longer frightened her. She was ready to embrace her gift for renewal, to start again without fear of failure. The artist in her felt alive once more. Luka's mind was calmer than it had been in a long time. Leadership, he realized, was not about control. It was about guiding, about listening, about bringing others along on the journey. He smiled, thinking of his team back at the office. This time, he would lead differently. Sophie's heart was lighter. She no longer felt the need to maintain peace at the cost of her own happiness. She had learned to speak her truth, and in doing so she had found a new kind of peace, one that came from within, not from the absence of conflict. Kaito walked with a new sense of purpose. The endless search for inspiration had given way to a quiet confidence. He didn't need to chase the next idea anymore. He knew that by staying present, by focusing on the moment, the inspiration would come when it was ready. And when it did, he would be ready too. As they parted ways, each of them felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had come to the temple seeking answers, and while they hadn't found what they had expected, they had found something far more valuable: clarity, purpose, and the strength to walk their path with intention. The numbers, they realized, were not a prison. They were a guide, a reminder that while life might be shaped by certain energies, it was always within their power to choose how they would move forward. And with that understanding, they stepped into the world, ready to live beyond the digits.